There's something mysteriously profound about INFJs, something that makes them wise beyond their years, deeply intuitive and quietly powerful. But beneath all that depth lies a truth many people never see. A true INFJ doesn't bow easily. They are not humbled by human criticism, emotional pressure, or public opinion. Their inner world is too strong, their convictions too deeply rooted, and their spiritual sensitivity too finely tuned. The only voice that can truly reach them, reshape them, and humble them at the core is the voice of God Himself. In this video, we're going deep into the soul of the INFJ to uncover why divine correction, divine disruption, and divine love are the only forces capable of touching the parts of them no human ever could. If you want to truly understand yourself and unlock your full potential as an INFJ, check out the INFJ Purpose Compass today. The link is in the description of this video. A true INFJ moves through life with a quiet intensity that most people never fully understand. Their inner world is vast, layered, symbolic, and deeply principled. And because of this, they often walk with a kind of spiritual and psychological self-assurance that few personalities possess. This isn't arrogance. It's the deep-rooted conviction that comes from living according to an internal compass so strong that the outside world rarely has the power to shake it. And this is exactly why only God can humble an INFJ in the truest, deepest sense. INFJs aren't easily influenced by public opinion or social pressure. They listen, they observe, and they adapt, but they don't bend their core for anyone or anything they don't respect. They are quietly confident in their judgment, not because they think they know everything, but because they have spent their entire lives watching people, patterns, and motives with near-prophetic accuracy. The INFJ's intuition is so sharp that they often detect consequences long before others even sense a problem. They foresee emotional patterns, spiritual shifts, and relational storms in ways that feel almost supernatural. This gives them a quiet certainty that can appear unshakable. Yet it also means that human beings, no matter how wise, rarely have the depth or authority to confront them at the level where they truly live. Only God can reach the part of an INFJ that no one else has access to. Only He can enter the layers beneath their intuition, beneath their reasoning, beneath their emotional intelligence, and beneath their moral framework. INFJs intellectualize correction if it comes from people. They analyze it, break it down, understand it, and, if necessary, reframe it. They can empathize deeply with criticism without allowing it to pierce their core. But when God convicts an INFJ, it bypasses all their psychological defenses. It lands in the spirit. It penetrates the instincts they trust so fiercely. It confronts them with truth so absolute that even they can't reinterpret or soften it. The INFJ's pride is rarely loud or obvious. Their pride hides inside their competence, inside their insight, inside their ability to hold everything together when others fall apart. They pride themselves in being strong, understanding, stable, discerning, and wise. They pride themselves in being the one who sees clearly. But God alone has the authority to show an INFJ that their clarity is nothing compared to His perspective. He alone can take their most accurate intuition and show them how limited it still is. He alone can reveal motives they missed in themselves. He alone can expose the parts of their heart they believed were pure, but were actually coated with subtle self-reliance. People can challenge an INFJ's choices, but only God can expose their inner motives. People can question their decisions, but only God can reveal the cracks in their discernment. People can confront their behavior, but only God can touch their identity. And when He does, the INFJ is humbled not by fear or shame, but by overwhelming revelation. God humbles them through truth, through clarity, so piercing and so loving that it breaks through their deep inner fortresses. He doesn't shatter them. He unmasks them gently, precisely, like someone who has known their soul far longer than they have. INFJs also carry a deep sense of responsibility, an almost divine assignment they feel compelled to fulfill. They feel responsible for people's emotional well-being, responsible for the spiritual atmosphere of their relationships, responsible for guiding others toward growth. This inner mission becomes part of their identity. But God is the only one who can remind an INFJ that the weight of the world does not rest on their shoulders. He can show them that their sense of duty, noble as it is, becomes pride when it replaces surrender. When God humbles an INFJ, he doesn't tear down their calling. He repositions them within it. He reminds them that they are vessels, not saviors. The INFJ's relationship with God is often intensely private because their spiritual life runs deeper than their emotions. They feel conviction, guidance, and divine presence in ways they cannot express to others. When God corrects them, it feels like a deeply personal conversation, one that cuts to the bone, one that leaves no room for excuses or self-justification, but also feels safe. INFJs resist correction from people because people misunderstand them. But when God corrects them, they melt, because he is the only one who sees the full picture of their heart. What humbles an INFJ most is not punishment or failure, but revelation. God humbles them by showing them who he is in comparison to who they are. He humbles them by revealing the magnitude of their blind spots. He humbles them by showing them layers of truth they never considered. He humbles them by reminding them that their intuition is merely a shadow of his omniscience. He humbles them through love so overwhelming that their defenses collapse. He humbles them by reminding them that no matter how wise they seem, they are still children in the presence of the eternal mind. And so, while an INFJ may appear confident, spiritually perceptive, emotionally intelligent, and morally grounded, they are still human, and humans have blind spots, weaknesses, and hidden pride. The world cannot humble the INFJ because the world cannot reach the depth of their inner sanctuary. Only God can go there. Only he can speak to their soul in a language they cannot argue with. Only he can unravel their illusions without destroying their identity. Only he can correct them in a way that deepens rather than diminishes them. A true INFJ bows only when the one who created their complexity calls them into surrender. God humbles them not to diminish their strength, but to refine it, not to break their spirit, but to align it, not to silence their insight, but to elevate it under his wisdom. Another dimension of why only God can humble a true INFJ lies in their unique ability to detach from the world when they feel overwhelmed, misunderstood, or wounded. INFJs have a powerful inner sanctuary, a place in their mind where they retreat and reorganize their thoughts, motives, and emotions. This internal world is so rich and self-sustaining that they can silence external voices simply by withdrawing inward. People lose access to them in these moments. Advice loses its weight. Expectations lose their force. Criticism loses its sting. But God does not lose access. In fact, he often meets the INFJ most powerfully in the places where they retreat. He steps into the quiet corners of their inner world and speaks in a voice that cuts through the fog, reminding them that even isolation cannot shield them from truth. This divine ability to find them in their hiding places is deeply humbling for an INFJ. They're used to being unreachable when they choose to be. They're used to having control over when and how they let people in. But God steps past their emotional walls with ease, not by force, but by presence. He meets them where their thoughts take refuge and gently turns their face toward perspectives they didn't want to confront. This experience is humbling because it shows them the limits of their independence. It proves to them that no matter how much psychological mastery they possess, they cannot shut God out of the rooms where they hide, even from themselves. INFJs also have a deep desire for purity of heart. They want their motives to be noble, their intentions to be clean, and their actions to be meaningful. Because of this longing, they often hold themselves to incredibly high moral and spiritual standards. They analyze their behavior through an internal lens of conscience that is far harsher than anything other people could impose. This internal moral system gives them a sense of direction and identity. But this is another area where only God can humble them. He reveals the subtle impurities they overlook because they believe their heart was in the right place. He shows them the pride wrapped inside their desire to do good. He exposes the self-centeredness that sometimes hides behind their selflessness. And when he does, the revelation shakes them. This kind of correction is different from human judgment. Humans misinterpret INFJs easily. God does not. So when God reveals a flaw, the INFJ feels the weight of it deeply. Not because they feel condemned, but because they finally see themselves with clarity that only the Creator can provide. This clarity humbles them in a way that no external moral standard ever could. Another reason only God can humble a true INFJ is because of how fiercely INFJs cling to meaning. They do not live casually. They don't make choices without purpose. Everything they do, feel, and believe has to be tied to something larger than themselves. They may endure suffering, rejection, or confusion, but if they can interpret the experience as meaningful, they will remain unbroken. This is a powerful resilience, but can also disguise a subtle pride. INFJs sometimes assign meaning to things based on their own intuition rather than God's truth. They interpret signs, emotions, and patterns in ways that reinforce their understanding rather than challenge it. And no human can fully correct these private interpretations because no human sees what the INFJ sees internally. God humbles the INFJ by dismantling meaning they built for themselves. He takes something they thought they understood and reveals a perspective that contradicts their interpretation. He shows them that they misread the situation, misunderstood the intention, or exaggerated the symbolism. This reorientation is humbling because INFJs trust their interpretations deeply. When God corrects their understanding, it teaches them that not even their intuition is flawless. It reminds them that mystery belongs to Him alone and that revelation is a gift, not an entitlement. INFJs are also humbled by the way God handles their compassion. INFJs often believe they are responsible for understanding everyone. They feel compelled to read between lines, to heal emotional wounds, and to carry burdens that don't belong to them. Their empathy can be so intense that they sometimes forget they are not the ultimate source of healing. God humbles them by reminding them that they cannot save people. They can guide, comfort, and understand, but they cannot transform another person's soul. When God steps into a situation the INFJ tried to fix on their own, He shows them how limited human empathy is without divine power supporting it. This humbles the INFJ in the deepest sense, not through shame or failure, but through the realization that their compassion is only impactful when aligned with God's grace. The INFJ's greatest fear is misalignment with purpose. They do not fear embarrassment, social rejection, or human disapproval the way many others do. What truly unsettles them is the possibility of drifting away from their calling. God uses this fear not to terrify them, but to anchor them. He gently reveals when they are walking out of sync with His plan, and this realization brings them to their knees, not out of defeat, but out of longing to realign. Only God can correct them in a way that connects directly to their deepest motivations. Only He can humble them by reminding them that purpose comes from Him alone, and without His direction, even the INFJ's most noble dreams can lead them astray. Another profound reason only God can humble a true INFJ is found in the way INFJs handle suffering. Unlike many personalities that fear pain or collapse under it, INFJs tend to romanticize or spiritualize their struggles. They see trials as catalysts for growth, purification, or deeper understanding. This mindset gives them a supernatural endurance that often impresses others. They can survive heartbreak, betrayal, and emotional exhaustion with a quiet dignity that makes people assume they are stronger than they actually feel. But this ability to make meaning out of pain can become a form of pride. INFJs begin to believe they can interpret every storm, rise from every wound, and navigate every season through their own inner insight. God humbles them by giving them experiences that cannot be decoded, rationalized, or spiritualized through intuition alone. He allows a situation where the INFJ's symbolic thinking fails, where their ability to make meaning collapses, and where their inner resilience doesn't provide the clarity it normally does. It's in these moments that God becomes the only source of interpretation. The INFJ cannot assign significance, cannot see the bigger picture, and cannot rely on their wisdom. They are forced into surrender not because they are weak, but because God intentionally removes the lens they normally use to survive. This is deeply humbling for an INFJ because it reminds them that not all suffering is meant to be understood. Some is meant to lead them into dependence on God rather than insight. Another reason God alone can humble them is because of the INFJ's deep relationship with conviction. INFJs have a powerful internal compass, and once they believe something is right, they pursue it with unwavering commitment. This makes them principled, loyal, and morally grounded. But it can also make them inflexible in areas where they've misheard or misinterpreted something. INFJs don't easily admit when their convictions are flawed because they genuinely believed they were following truth. When God steps in, he doesn't argue with them. He reveals. He illuminates the very conviction they trusted most and gently exposes the human layer mixed into what they thought was purely spiritual discernment. When that revelation comes, the INFJ feels undone, not from shame but from awe. Being corrected in the area they were most certain about humbles them in a way no human correction ever could. INFJs are also humbled by the way God deals with their hidden expectations. INFJs often carry quiet assumptions about how certain things should unfold, the timing of their purpose, the nature of their relationships, the trajectory of their spiritual growth. They don't express these expectations outwardly, but they structure entire internal narratives around them. When life deviates from these silent expectations, the INFJ doesn't immediately complain. They internalize confusion, searching for symbolic alignment. God humbles them by disrupting the script they wrote for their own life. He closes doors they believed were destined for them, redirects relationships they thought were forever, delays breakthroughs they were sure were near. These unexpected detours humble the INFJ because they force them to release control over the storyline they crafted within their imagination. This kind of divine disruption is something no human advice can replicate. People can tell an INFJ to trust the process, but INFJs only surrender when God shows them that the process is not theirs to design. He reveals that their imagination, as powerful as it is, must bow to his sovereignty. This awakening is humbling because INFJs secretly pride themselves on seeing the path ahead more clearly than others. When God closes a path they were convinced was correct, they are reminded that divine vision surpasses intuition every time. Another unique way God humbles an INFJ is through love. INFJs are incredibly perceptive in understanding the emotional and spiritual needs of others, but they often struggle to receive love deeply themselves. They tend to feel unworthy, misunderstood, or too complex to be loved fully. So they hide in service, support, and sacrifice. They give love endlessly, but rarely allow themselves to be the ones who are carried. God humbles them by overwhelming them with a love so personal, direct, and unexplainable that they cannot deflect it or rationalize it away. This love breaks their emotional distance and forces them to confront the parts of themselves that they believed were undeserving of tenderness. Being loved at the deepest level humbles them more than correction ever could. God touches the parts of them they thought were too complicated for anyone to understand. He comforts wounds they thought they had healed on their own. He pours affection into corners of their soul they never allowed anyone else to enter. This kind of love strips away self-protection and exposes their need in a way that feels both terrifying and beautiful. Receiving love, true, divine, unconditional love, becomes the most humbling experience of all.